Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Foreign Secretary for the work he's done moving government policy on this issue and for putting the situation in Gaza at the top of his agenda. In particular, can I commend the fact that he and the Prime Minister have consistently called for international law to be followed in the conflict. When will he publish the government's assessment of whether any parties have breached international law since the 7th of October and what the consequences of any such breaches should be?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for that question, and I know that he has been a champion of the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people in this House for many, many years indeed. He pushes me on an important subject. Can I say to him, and he's an esteemed lawyer, so he understands why I'm choosing my words carefully, this is a quasi-legal process, and it's important that I follow the actions in the appropriate way, with all probity and all integrity. So I will consider those assessments when they are made available to me. I instigated a process on the first day in office. I am supported, of course, in that by our Attorney General, and I hope to be able to make my views known with full accountability and transparency.
Muir Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Could I welcome the Foreign Secretary to his place, and I welcome the decision to restore UNRWA funding and the overall change of tone from his predecessors on this issue. Liberal Democrats have long called for arms sales to Israel to be suspended whilst there are questions over their human rights record. As Shadow Foreign Secretary, he called on the then Conservative government to publish the legal advice they'd received on this matter. Will he commit to doing so now?
Well, the Honourable Lady will have heard what was just said to the member for Hammersmith and Fulham, although there may be boundary changes that means that I've got Chiswick. It's now changed. Hammersmith has gone more upmarket. It's Chiswick, forgive me. You'll understand as the member for Tottenham, I think I can get away with that. But in all seriousness, because it's a very serious point, I will seek to make my decision with full accountability and transparency.
And any more?
Thank you. I welcome the Foreign Secretary's announcement on UNRWA, whose work I know well and which saves lives in the face of unbearable horror, and whose work we must be careful of believing misinformation about. Earlier this year, in one of the only hospitals still functioning in Gaza, I met a mother whose child had been injured by an Israeli airstrike. She asked me to tell the world what was being done to the Palestinians of Gaza. With almost 40,000 killed, she assumed we didn't know. Because if we knew, surely we would have acted to stop it. Does the Foreign Secretary agree with me that as well as an immediate and lasting ceasefire, accountability is essential in upholding international law, and that the International Criminal Court and International Court of Justice are doing vital work on Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory, which must be supported and acted on? And will he meet with me to discuss such issues?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, and many in this House will know her considerable work and the work of her colleagues on behalf of those suffering in Gaza over the last few months, and will also know just how hard and unbearable it has been for many, many of those working on the ground. She makes an important statement about the independence of the work of the ICC and the ICJ. And I believe, and I think all Democrats in this House should believe, in the separation of powers. Yeah. It is for judges and the judiciary to have the time and reflection to make their considerations, and it is for politicians to step back and respect them in that process. That is the case domestically in our own country, and it must be the case with international courts of law. And of course, I will meet with her and other colleagues and keep them updated.
Any chance?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Foreign Secretary and his team to their places, and I welcome the statement that he has just made. In particular, I welcome the emphasis on the need for an immediate ceasefire, the immediate release of all hostages, and I welcome the emphasis on the need for a stop to settler violence and expansion in the West Bank, as I also welcome the resumption of funding to UNRWA. As a couple of honourable members have already emphasised, I would like to add my voices to the calls for the Foreign Secretary to commit to publishing the comprehensive review of Israel's compliance or non-compliance with international humanitarian law as soon as it is completed by officials. And I would like to ask the Foreign Secretary, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if he will, in the meantime, apply the precautionary principle and act to stop all UK arms exports to Israel, given that there is widespread evidence of considerable breaches of international law already. Thank you.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady's remarks, and I welcome her to the House representing North Herefordshire, I think, on behalf of the Green Party. Can I say to her that she will recognise, and I said in my remarks, that it is the case that this is one of the toughest neighbourhoods in the world, and Israel is a country surrounded by people who would see its annihilation. It is being attacked by the Houthis. It is being fired, missiles firing from Hezbollah, notwithstanding the desire for Hamas to wipe Israel off the map. For those reasons, it would not be right to have a blanket ban between our countries and Israel. What is right is for me to consider the issues in relation to offensive weapons in Gaza in the normal way, following the quasi-judicial process that I've outlined.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and can I welcome my right honourable friend to his place and congratulate him for giving priority to this particular issue on behalf of my constituents of Warwick and Leamington. Can I commend him for today's announcement? The restoration of funding to UNRWA is long overdue. Many other nations, as we've heard, did this many months ago. Given their importance for the supply of 60% of aid into Gaza, 50% of food as well, we heard that 70 trucks a day is way insufficient compared to the 500 estimated to be needed. My right honourable friend may be aware of the Oxfam report, which shows that there's been almost a systematic use of the weaponisation of water by the IDF in Gaza. We've seen a reduction of 94% of supply of water, just 5 litres per person per day. Given what my right honourable friend was talking about in terms of dysentery and polio, what does he believe the UK can do to assist the restoration of water supply in Gaza?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend and for his continuing champion of these issues. He's right to mention the importance of water. And when we talk about the numbers of people, I think it's 500,000 people now at category 5 on the definitions that constitutes starvation and famine. A large part of that is no access to clean water. And of course, he knows the scenes and the sight of sewage also in the system. And the lack of clean water is a desperate situation. In the end, what we need is a ceasefire, because it's only with a ceasefire that the reconstruction work can begin.
Barry Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend was absolutely right to speak of the need for an immediate ceasefire. He was absolutely right in talking about the need to restore the funding to UNRWA, and I welcome both those moves. He also spoke of the government needing to make an assessment of Israeli compliance with international humanitarian law in Gaza. But the question then arises, after that assessment's been made, what is going to happen? He said in his statement, the horror must end now. And indeed it must. But he's just explained to another honourable member that actually to cease supplying arms to Israel would cause, as he sees it, a greater problem. What is the leverage that he has? Because if the horror must end now, and it must, then this government must be able to take some actions once it has reviewed and received the legal assessment that he has called for. I'm prepared to give him time to get that assessment, but I want to know what he's going to do once he's got it.
Well, my right honourable friend is very experienced. He's experienced to know that the minute any individual describes his leverage, the leverage is lost. So he'll forgive me, I'm not going to share that at the dispatch box at this stage. But the passion that lies behind his question is a concern that for 9 months, foreign secretaries have stood at this dispatch box and they've said that the aid must get in. They've said that we must follow international humanitarian law. And months later, there's a new foreign secretary at the dispatch box, and there are serious concerns about international humanitarian law, and the aid has simply not got in the quantities. So he shares my frustration, and it was frustration indeed that I shared with leaders in Israel.
Emily Darlington.
Sorry, Speaker. I wasn't bobbing, but happy to ask a question. Are you sure it was me you were calling on?
Please go ahead, because the clerks are struggling a bit with new members. So.
First, I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend for his position and to his entire team, and absolutely congratulate and to thank him for the restoration of funding to UNRWA. As somebody who's worked in international development, I've seen the absolutely vital work that these organisations play, and in particularly that dedication to those organisations under the United Nations umbrella, because they are where we can come together as an international force. Would he agree with me that the solutions in the Israeli-Palestine conflict are not ones that are necessarily here, but ones that we have to work with our international partners to build? Thank you.
The member for Milton Keynes Central has got off to a good start. Can I say she's absolutely right. One, because we've seen so many aid workers lose their lives, but two, because her emphasis on the partnership that we have to strike with allies across the world is essential if we are to deliver the change that we need to see in Gaza particularly, but also, I think, in the occupied territories.
Poynton.
It's very welcome to see the Secretary of State and his team on the front bench as Britain's voice in the world. As a particular significance for me, as one of my predecessors in the Livingston constituency was Robin Cook. And I know Robin Cook's time in office and thinking has done much to inform the Secretary of State's approach to his new role. The statement this morning was incredibly welcome, although it did set out that horrific situation on the ground in Gaza. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that there is no peace without a two-state solution, and that those who are opposing a two-state solution is wrong for both Israelis and the Palestinian people?
Well, I'm very grateful to have been asked a question by the new occupant of Robin Cook's seat. I think a stalwart and a champion of this cause, and I was very grateful to come into this House when he was serving as Foreign Secretary, and in an article I wrote recently in Foreign Affairs, I paid tribute to his work over so many years. I have to say, the vote by the Knesset, Mr. Deputy Speaker, yesterday was hugely disappointing. We believe passionately in two states. And I say to those who reject two states, if you are a proponent of one state, then you do have to explain how everyone enjoys equality under the law. And if you are a proponent of no state, then you are effectively suggesting that occupation continues. And that is unacceptable to, I would have thought, all members of this House.
Florence Eshelin.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And can I congratulate and welcome my friend, the Right Honourable Member, to his role as the Foreign Secretary. I welcome his statement this morning outlining the restoration of the UNRWA funding. We on these benches have been calling for that for a long time. The Foreign Secretary will remember and recount that many of us have raised the issue of the humanitarian aid, including the fact that many aid organisations met with us throughout the course of the last Parliament, including Islamic Relief, who are based in my constituency. He told me the harrowing story 2 days after the 7th of October, when they lost contact with all their staff on the ground. But we know that a key issue with the aid is the blockages and the restrictions of the aid getting in. Can the Foreign Secretary outline how the blockades and restrictions will be lifted so that urgent aid can get in to the people who urgently need it?
Well, I'm very grateful for my honourable friend's question, and can I just congratulate her for her remarkable speech at the beginning of the King's speech. She has also raised these issues, and we have certainly shared a Christian faith and have talked about our deep concern as people of faith. Can I pay tribute to the work of Islamic Relief? Can I say one of the issues is that Rafah is now closed and it needs to reopen. And there is a real issue about not just the trucks getting across, but the distribution once they are there. And very sadly, the picture that has now been painted is of lawlessness in Gaza, widespread looting from the trucks that get across, and very sadly, a driver losing his life yesterday. So her question, as the people of Vauxhall and Camberwell Green would say, is on point.
Andrew Peggs.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'd like to welcome my honourable friend to his position and welcome the restoration of funding to UNRWA. It is good to see when we talked about changing this election, we also meant an international approach of this government. I know he, alongside this House, will share in the revulsion at the ongoing horror faced by hostages, their families and innocent civilians in Gaza who are facing the enduring crisis. A revulsion shared by many people in my constituency in Peterborough. And it is a privilege to be a voice for them in calling for a ceasefire, a release of the hostages, peace and a complete solution to recognise Palestine. Can I ask him what message would he give to constituents of mine who have seen the discussion about a two-state solution for too long, that this time, with a new government, we actually have a new approach which will deal with the immediate crisis, but actually recognition of Palestine?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Peterborough, a city that he knows, I know very well, having spent 7 years of my life in that great cathedral city. And I've knocked on doors with him, and I know that this is an issue of great concern in Peterborough. Can I say to him that we are absolutely committed to that two-state solution, that the global community for too many years have talked about it and not acted, that I recognise that now is there's almost tremendous cynicism when the phrase is used, but there is no way out of this crisis with a plan for afterwards. It must guarantee, of course, the security of Israel, but can I just say the Palestinian cause is a just cause, and we must work with Arab partners. We must build up the Palestinian Authority, and I spoke to them at length about what more we can do to assist them with the reforms that they need to make so that we can realise that. And he's absolutely right to put on record our deep concern for the hostages, for their families, for their plight, and if they were released, we could end this now.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and may I warmly welcome my right honourable friend to his position as the first Labour Foreign Secretary for 14 years, which is very welcome. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the UK's extensive, long-standing diplomatic, economic, cultural and defence ties with the Gulf, Arab and other Middle Eastern governments mean that we're better placed to bring our influence to bear to work in cooperation with our international partners to achieve a two-state solution that ensures a safe and secure Israel and a viable, sovereign and one day, we hope, prosperous Palestinian state. And can he also assure me that all will be done to enable British organisations and companies to play their fullest role in rebuilding Gaza's infrastructure and economy?
What can I say to the new member for Rugby? It's a very good question, and it's why, in opposition, I spent so much time with partners in the region, talking to them about the future. All of them want to be engaged. All of them want peace. All of them want to move towards a series of normalisation. But they are all crystal clear. That cannot happen by ignoring the plight of the Palestinian people and setting up a roadmap to two states. They are not prepared to reconstruct Gaza for this to happen yet again in 25 years' time. So we have to work with them. They play a critical role, but we must now get to that immediate ceasefire.
Lawrence Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and may I welcome the Foreign Secretary and his team to their places. And may I also strongly welcome the decision announced today to restore funding for UNRWA, which will be recognised by many people in South Birmingham as an important step, amongst many others, towards ending the horror that we see today in Gaza. The Israeli government's decision to end the legal routes for Palestinians to work in Israel has played an important role in the entrenchment of poverty and political instability in the West Bank, alongside the illegal settlement programme. Will he make representations on this important matter, recognising that both the Israeli Histadrut and the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions have an important role to play as pillars of civil society in both nations in the establishment of a lasting peace?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for the question. It gives me an opportunity to just talk about what I saw on the West Bank. The situation is febrile. It's anxious. There is tremendous hardship because of the withdrawal of those funds. It's phenomenally tense, and against a backdrop, people are watching their land being taken from them before their eyes. And so the representations that he asked me to make are absolutely the representations I made when I spoke to the leadership in Israel, because this simply cannot continue, and we must act. We must act to stop it.
Dan Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and may I welcome the Foreign Secretary and the whole front bench team to their place. It's wonderful to see. I want to welcome to the visit that the Foreign Secretary took to the Middle East and thank him for the time spent meeting the families of the hostages who've been held in Gaza for 9 months now. I want to ask that he will commit to doing everything he can to ensure that the hostages are released immediately.
Well, can I welcome my North London colleague to his seat? He represents a part of the country with a significant Jewish population, and I'm very proud in my own constituency of the Stamford Hill area of Tottenham, which is also an historic home of the Jewish population. And they are hugely concerned about the plight of hostages, and they worry that the discussion about hostages has sort of fallen off the lips of so many people. They worry that the horrors of October the 7th have been forgotten against the backdrop of this unfolding crisis and this war. And I want to reassure him and them that they have not been forgotten. And of course, the British government, and this is a cross-party issue, is working very, very closely with the Israelis and others to see their release.